Hi, everybody. It's Steve from Credit Suite, and welcome to another episode of Industry Leaders. And today we have a serious player with us. I would like everybody to welcome Ellen Voie. Am I saying that right, Ellen?
Voie.
Voie. She's a lot. She's the host of SiriusXM's Women in Trucking show. She is the president, is that right, of Women in Trucking, the association.
Correct.
I'm just going to explain to you just about her show, but there are so many things that Ellen does and has done that it would take me 45 minutes just to read her accomplishments. Uh, the Women in Trucking show, hosted by Ellen, features listener call-ins and interviews with professionals from the trucking industry, from drivers, technicians, engineers, transportation CEOs, dispatchers, in other words, the gamut, sharing their stories of the challenges and opportunities on the open road. Women in Trucking is a show geared towards men and women listeners, will also addresses gender diversity issues, pushing for more women to join its ranks, which I 1,000% agree. With women making up just under 8% of the trucking industry workforce, SiriusXM's Women in Trucking will help promote the employment of more women by identifying and removing the obstacles that keep them from entering the field. How was that, Ellen?
Yeah, awesome.
I'm a
Perfect.
new radio. So first of all, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We're going to have fun. You ready to have fun?
I am ready to have fun.
Okay, so I've got my first question is going to be, what prompted you to start Women in Trucking? I'm not even talking about the radio. I'm just talking about the association.
So a number of years ago, I was working for a very large carrier, Schneider National in Midwest, and they hired me as manager of recruiting and retention programs. So that's corporate level initiatives to attract and retain non-traditional groups. And they said, figure out how to bring in more Hispanics, returning military, seniors, and women. And they said, do your research. And so I started doing my research on women and realized that we really weren't doing a very good job of identifying what brings women into the industry. And actually at the time, Steve, I was getting my pilot's license and I belonged to a women in aviation organization. And so I thought, well, why is there one for female pilots and not an organization for women in the trucking industry? So I started it in March of 2007. And I hired someone else because I still had a full-time job at that time. And it's 13 years later, it's grown, 13 and a half, it's grown way beyond my wildest imagination.
How many members do you have?
We have about 5,200 members, active members in 10 countries.
Wow. Wow. That's a lot. And obviously what you're doing is working. And I'm going to tell you why. And I think I mentioned this last time we talked. I interview industry leaders, and right now we're focused on trucking. And my last 4 interviews were all influencers in the trucking business who were all women.
Awesome.
Which is amazing. It blew me away. I mean, not because I didn't expect. I mean, I guess I didn't expect it, but just because I grew up with all the people I knew were truckers were all men. I just had no idea. Although
right.
I will tell you, when I was at the Iowa 80 truck stop, it was 50% women that were there. It wasn't like just a bunch of guys running around.
It's really changed. We've come a long way. I'd say we were about at 3% when I started Women in Trucking. We're actually over 10% female drivers right now, according to a survey that we did with FreightWaves late last year. So 10.2%.
That's amazing. So are you out there actively recruiting, or are you just educating?
I would say we're educating, and we do that many ways. But first of all, the mission you kind of stated, it's to encourage the employment of women in the trucking industry, and then to address obstacles and to celebrate success. And the third part, when we say celebrate success, is telling stories. So I think by telling our stories, especially to the non-trucking public, like we had a driver on the Megyn Kelly show, and she was talking about how much she loves driving at night. Her husband drives during the day, and she talked about sunrises and sunsets and the view from her office window. Our phones just lit up. I mean, women saw her as a driver and said, if she can do it, I can do it. And so we have to tell our stories in order to get other people to even consider careers in transportation.
I love it. I love it. And I've been to your website, and I've seen a few things. Like, it's not just that the getting people aware, or women aware of, that they can be truckers, no problem. It's also helping them with the challenges. And there are a lot of challenges, right?
A lot of the challenges, and a lot of the challenges, let's separate them between drivers or corporate. Okay,
Oh,
so
yeah, yeah, that's where I was going, down the corporate
yeah.
road.
Well, in let me talk about the drivers' challenges first, and that's safety. We did a best practices study and asked female drivers how safe they feel on a scale of 1 to 10, and the average response was 4.4. Now, if you said to me, I only feel safe less than half of the time I go to work, would you want to work wherever?
No.
No. So part of that is what is the culture of the company? You know, what is the safety culture? What, you know, and then part of it is where are they delivering and how well maintained is the equipment? And these days, are you sending your drivers to areas that might have protests? You know, things like that.
Sure.
So and so the safety culture, and then we work with the truck stops on safety and security and amenities, lighting, fencing, security. And then we also work with the carriers. We have an anti-harassment employment guide that we give if there's two unrelated individuals, maybe a team situation or a training situation. So for drivers, it's really about increasing their safety and also their comfort. We work with the truck cab manufacturers on truck cab design and ergonomics so that women are as comfortable in the cab of a truck as men. Because I can tell you that truck manufacturers even admitted that years ago, they designed trucks for the 85th percentile male. I still haven't figured out what that means.
You mean us big fat guys?
But I mean, we hear stories of women who had to sit on pillows or put blocks on their feet to reach the pedals, or they couldn't see over the dash. Well, the manufacturers are realizing that women are making up a larger percentage of drivers, and they're doing that. So that's the driver side. Let's talk about the management side. We do a Women in Trucking Index every year of the 15 publicly traded companies, and half of them have no women in management, and about a third have no women on their boards. And so when I see a CEO and I go, hey, you know, when are you going to get some more women in management or more women on your board? They're like, yeah, I know, we got to do that. But we also monitor for trucking companies. Women in management only make up 24% of management in transportation. So, and actually 24% is, we've come a long way, but still that's only 1 out of 4. So we really, like our conference is all about empowering women and giving them tools to advance their careers. So we might have a speaker talking about negotiation skills. Women are less comfortable negotiating because we want you to like us. We don't want to put, you know, guys, when, you know, if you're buying a car and you're like, oh, I'm going to see how much I can get out of this guy, you guys look at it as a challenge and a game. For women, it's like, I'm going to go buy a Saturn because the sticker's on the window, right?
I don't have to negotiate.
Right. So negotiation skills, also tooting your own horn. Women want to be liked. Women are collaborative. Women are team oriented. And so, and women make decisions differently than men. So if your leadership team values quick decision making, then it's going to bias towards men, because men will take, let's say you have 5 options, they're going to narrow it down to the top 1 or 2 and then make a fast decision. Where women will look at 5 options and go, did I miss anything? Call her friends and say, are there any other things that I might have missed? And then they'll discuss it. And then she'll come up with maybe more options and then have to go through all of those. And then finally we'll come back and say, this is the one I, you know, think is the best option. Now, neither one is wrong. Okay. But if your culture demands quick decision-making and definitive, you know, decision-making, then you're going to be biased towards men.
Well, it's funny because I kind of feel like the other one's going to be more right. My wife's always right. She thinks about things through. I'm just like, let's just do this. Well, you know what's funny? I asked that question for a reason, because I did go to your website and I did read a little bit. And the one thing that it never occurred to me, that we tend, as a society, we tend to broad stroke our solutions to things, right? We just broad stroke it. So here's what we're going to do. Women are all equal, and we're going to treat them exactly equal. So let's go ahead and put a man and a woman who are strangers in a cab with a sleeper and send them out on the road for training. And I went, never even occurred to me. But that was the broad stroke answer of, we have to treat everybody equal. But in reality, that's impossible, right? Because you have to think of safety, you have to think of comfortability, right?
That's one of my goals, is to get the industry to change their training practices. because one company tried to do a same gender training policy and would only match female trainees with female trainers. And the EEOC came in and said, well, you're training men more quickly than women. And the EEOC sued them for millions of dollars. So they are forced to have to be gender blind because they didn't have as many female trainers as they needed. So now when I talk to female trainees and ask them, how do you feel? So, all right, I don't know if you have any kids, Steve, but let's say you have.
I have a 27-year-old daughter. So.
Okay, let's say your 27-year-old daughter calls you up and says, Dad, I just got this new job and I just finished training and I can't wait to get started, but I really feel uncomfortable because when I travel, I have to share a room with my boss. What would you say?
It's not what I would say that matters.
Well,
it's what
but that's what we're doing.
I know, I get it.
A female trainee in the cab of a truck with a sleeper berth 12 inches away and telling them, oh, well, you have to, when he's driving, you have that bottom bunk and when, whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's just so wrong, but we've always done it that way.
Well, that's what I was talking about, the broad stroke, because the EOC is basically forcing the hands of the employers to say, yeah, I guess we have to hire less women then because this is a problem. They're not comfortable and we don't have enough trainers. So it's almost a backhanded way of stopping the equality of women and men. It's weird.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, when I read it, I went, never even occurred to me. It's not even something I would have thought of. And these are the things your organization does.
Right. I like to be a disruptor. I like to come in and say, all right, so these are the best practices. So we have one carrier member and all their drivers stay in hotels every night. So you get your own hotel room, you get your own bathroom, to me, that's a best practice. So
absolutely.
And I've had carriers tell me, well, this female trainee wants to stay in a hotel, but if I do that, I'm setting a precedent. I got to do it for everyone. And, and I'm like, no.
Well, I don't want to get you upset today. I'm just asking questions. So you know what? I want to ask you about the growth of your organization, because I obviously, as a neophyte, can see just reading one article, I went, whoa, this is powerful stuff. Like this is next level thinking. Like you said, you're a disruptor, right? So when you obviously are that type of person, you've probably always been a disruptor. I'm assuming, right?
I was a difficult child.
but people don't know that when you start an organization. They don't know anything about you. So what was your biggest personal challenge in growing this? Because it's a unique organization. And, there's lots of trucking organizations out there. I mean, there's unions, there's lots of trucking organizations. Yours, you started it up, you must, I just can't imagine. What were the challenges you faced besides everybody saying no?
Well, first of all, people are watching to make you prove yourself. So you start a nonprofit association. And by the way, I did it in the middle of a recession. Okay, that's my first point. Don't start a nonprofit in the middle of a recession. But I called someone who had worked for me in the past and I said, I want you to work for me and I'll pay you really well, but I can't pay you right now. Luckily, she's married and her husband agreed to it. So, and there was a point where she was sitting on paychecks and couldn't cash them. But I believed in the mission. And I believe that in the first year, Steve, we hit 500 members, the first year.
Wow.
So obviously we struck a nerve. And then the biggest challenge is managing growth. So we had 2 employees at first, one, and then finally it had grown enough so that I could be paid. And then over the years, I've had help, like I hired an association management person, so one person. Well, now I've got an association management firm. I've got 5 employees, and I've got about 8 in the association management firm. And so we can grow as we need to because I got that level of expansion. So, but the growth has been phenomenal. And when my board sets goals, I blast those goals out of the water. Now, I don't know about this year, but I don't think anyone is going to hold that against me. But we've struck a nerve in this industry. And so let me tell you, 13 years ago, okay, when I started Women in Trucking, trucking company executives would say to me, "Oh, Ellen, we don't care if they're female or male. We don't care if they're old or young. We don't care about their ethnicity. We just want good drivers." Okay, well, guess what? 80% of the drivers in this country are white and they're males. I mean, 90% are males, but almost 80% are white. And so I'm like, okay, but you don't have facilities, you don't have restrooms for women. You're making women wear men's shirts. You're giving out big belt buckles for safe driving awards. Your trucks aren't even fitted to women. So you tell me that you have a level playing field. Well, I will tell you that you don't have a level playing field, and you're not even recruiting women. And so when I started saying, what about this or what about that, they go, oh, yeah, we do give out big belt buckles for safe driving awards. I guess we need to stop that. And one trucking company executive told me that he used to give out rings to drivers when they get safe driving awards. And he actually had, you know how big those rings are. He had to take a woman to a jewelry store to pick out a ring, and he goes, whoa, that was weird.
Wow.
So it's really talking to pointing things out, and saying, you say this is a level playing field, but it's not. And a great example, okay, so if you look at America's road team this year, there's 12 individuals on there. They all wear these nice navy blue suits. They've got white shirts, gray slacks, and red and blue ties. There's 4 women in that photo, and you can't pick them out. Yeah, because they're dressed like the men. And you know what? We've always done it that way.
Well, that's where I guess I was going. I think what happens is people get stuck at this is the way things are. Nobody thinks about changing until a disruptor shows up. Mm-hmm. And goes, whoa, did you notice? Did you ever notice? So obviously you're on the right path. You've grown this exponentially. It's amazing you have that many members in such few years. What's ahead? What's next?
Well, so I want to expand more internationally. We do have members in other countries because they want to learn from us. But I also would like to maybe, a couple things we are working on. One is a new driver ambassador program, and that's a female driver in a tractor trailer, and we're retrofitting it. We're putting in a simulator. We're putting in, touch screens, learning things, and that should be done by the end of the year. And so she'll be going to schools, maybe even high schools, I'm not sure, but trade shows, and talking to people about being a driver. And the graphics on it are going to be really cool. I can't reveal it yet, but it's when our tractor trailer pulls into anywhere, they're going to look at it and go, wow. So that's one thing. We're starting new chapters. So we're 13 years old. So maybe about 6 years ago, this association management firm came to me and said, have you ever thought about doing a conference? Like, yeah, I would love to do a conference, but it's real expensive. And so we worked out, and the first year we had 300 people at our conference. And the next year we had 500. And the third year we had 600. And the fourth year we had 800. And last year we had 1,100 people at our conference. And it was our 5th conference. So, and 85% are women.
Well, listen, that's a big conference. It doesn't matter whose it is. I've spoken at a lot of conferences, and I think I've only been at one where there was over 1,000. So that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Yep. And unfortunately this year we had to go virtual. But the growth of our conference, I mean, just me standing up in front of 1,100 people, it's emotional for me to think, wow, this, 13 years ago, who would have thought?
Well, that's, it's funny. You hear that all the time, right? Who knew? And I recognize your story of, well, I just couldn't cash or my employees couldn't cash paychecks. But, that's the growth. It's funny. People will look at anybody's success and be, wow, must be nice. But they weren't there when it wasn't nice, right?
I did a lot of freelance writing just to, supplement my income.
Well, okay. So that's great. So that means you're a writer, but what brought you to radio?
Oh my gosh. In high school, that's all I wanted was broadcast journalism. And I actually went to college for broadcast journalism. I actually went to technical college first. And then in college, I got my third class radio operator's license and worked for as a disc jockey at a radio station in Ohio in my early years. And I realized that disc jockeys don't make any money.
Nope.
So I ended up working at a steel fabricating plant as a drafter. I had done shop class in high school and I learned how to draft and weld and things like that. So got a job in drafting, and they came to me one day and said, hey, we want to move you into the traffic department and we'll send you to school. So I thought, okay, let's try it. So I was the assistant traffic manager at a steel fabricating plant. We had 3 plants, and I was responsible for all the raw material steel coming in and all the fabricated material handling equipment going out. And then my boss left and I got promoted to traffic manager, and then ended up getting married and to a professional driver who owned we started a small fleet. And so for 18 years I did consulting for trucking companies using my skills in as a traffic manager, I could read tariffs, audit freight bills, things like that. And so I did consulting to trucking companies to keep their trucks and their drivers legal. So I've got a regulatory background. And then anyway, so fast forward, here I am at Women in Trucking, and I'd get invited to these radio interviews. And finally they said, SiriusXM actually said, well, you should have your own radio show. And I'm like, yes.
That's funny. Real quick interjection. That was always what I wanted to do. Always wanted to be a disc jockey. I told you I was a rock and roller.
Yeah.
And I was showing a house to somebody. It was in my late 20s. And he was a DJ, a top DJ for a big station in Philadelphia. And so when he applied for the mortgage and I got all his financials, I saw what he made. I went, oh my God, I'm never doing this. I was shocked. I was like, that's it? I make more than that every quarter.
Right.
That's like, because they're famous, but there's no money attached to it.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So I was smiling when you were saying that story. So now you've got your radio show. Tell me the first time. Were you nervous? The very first time?
Oh yeah. And I had, so the thing is, when you're live and you're taking callers, I've got, SiriusXM is located in New York. So my call screener is in New York. Here I am in my office in Wisconsin with the equipment. They wired my house, by the way. And so they would tell me, okay, this driver's calling in and this is what they want to talk about. And so I get to choose if I want to take calls because they're screened, but you never know what you're going to get. And yes, I was very nervous. And then the hardest thing is you have hard stops. Like at, the call screener will be texting me like 30 seconds until, the break. And so if you've got a guest who's chatting on, you have to go, can you hold that thought? We'll be right back after these messages. Right? So yep. you have to really, and you have to remember to keep repeating who you're talking to, because they said, on TV, typically someone will sit down and watch a show, but on radio, they're going grocery shopping. They listen to the station, they go in the grocery store, they come back out. Now who's she talking to? So you have to keep repeating who you're, so I want to remind our listeners that our guest today is so-and-so, And
you know what? That's a great point. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to remind you all that our guest today is Ellen Voie with Women in Trucking. That's a great point.
And so my show is different every week. And so it could be an author who wrote books. It could be a musician. It could be someone who won an award. It could be, you name it. But one of the most interesting ones was I had Truckers Against Child Abuse and Truckers Against Trafficking on one day. And drivers were calling in and sharing their stories. And it was really amazing that they were, luckily they don't tell me their real names. They just tell me their CV handles. So I'm like, wow. I mean, it was touching.
Yeah, I was emotional. I can imagine. Yeah, absolutely. So how long is this? You've had this radio show now?
It'll be 3 years at the end in December.
Congratulations. That means you were good enough that they didn't go, all right, Ellen, we're done. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea.
They keep renewing my contract, which is kind of weird because I don't get paid to do it, which is kind of funny because people go, well, why are you doing it? And I said, because I get to talk to people. I get to promote our members. I get to talk about fun things, and I love it so much. So, and when I say I don't get paid, it's part of my job,
I understand. Do they track how many listeners do you have?
They don't tell you.
They don't tell you. So as far as we all know, ladies and gentlemen, she's got 23 million
Oh
listeners.
yeah, definitely all over North America.
Every truck driver on the road is tuned into Ellen's show.
Well, what's so rewarding is like when we have a trade show, like the Great American Trucking Show or the Mid American Trucking Show.
Right.
They bring the talent. I'll say talent, and have us sit and do live shows. And people will come up to me and tell me, "Oh, I listen to you every Saturday, and my favorite show was this," and I'll go, "Well, why don't you call in?" Oh no, they don't want to call in. You know.
No, but that's great to know, right? Because you're sharing all this wonderful information. So you have guests on. You did say you had guests on all the time. How long is your show?
2 hours. It starts at 10 Central and ends
Okay.
at noon Central. And
Okay.
it's channel 146 is actually called Road Dog Trucking. So it is the trucking channel.
Oh, it is the Road Dog Trucking Channel. That's what I was curious about.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know there's another host on there. I can't remember his name. It doesn't matter. He's not as big as you. So what's next for Ellen?
Wow. I want to retire.
Don't we all?
Well, I've actually started my board has insisted that I have a succession plan. So this year, in addition to hiring a driver ambassador, I hired a vice president. And so we're getting used to each other. That's my succession plan. It won't be for a few years, but if something were to happen to me, what would happen? Because I am the face of the organization, and so I need to start transitioning, away from that, so that
it continues to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you know what, and that brings up a great point. What do you want your legacy to be? Like when if you look back, and go, you know what? This is what I thought I was going to accomplish, but man, this is really what I want this to end up looking like when it's all said and done.
I want the trucking industry, I want to be the disruptor that makes the trucking industry realize that to make it a true level playing field, they have to examine all of their misconceptions, their unconscious bias, and anything we've always done it that way. I want them to reconsider and go, well, we don't have to do it that way anymore. So I want to be the disruptor that says, Ellen made us look at the world differently.
I have to imagine that can be something as small as, and I've talked to enough truckers, so some of these, and if I say something stupid, please stop me. But I know that pulling a flatbed is much harder than a trailer, because the flatbed, you have to constantly check the straps, right, for safety purposes. And I got to imagine that tightening those straps, that's designed for people who have a lot of strength, right?
We have female drivers who haul cars. We have female drivers who haul horses, female drivers who haul rigging and oversized overweight, and they love it. So that is the one thing I tell trucking companies is don't assume that women aren't going to want to do it, because some women will.
Oh, no, that's not what I meant. I agree with you. The last guest I had was a flatbed driver, right?
Awesome.
She said, however, it's all designed for bigger, stronger people. She said if they could just redesign the way you install the straps or whatever it was she was talking about. I don't know. I'm a neophyte when it comes to this. But that made me think how many other things, like changing a tire. I mean, that I look at all this and go, yeah, I get it. When I joined the Marine Corps, I was 119 pounds. I'm 219 pounds now, to give you an idea. And I remember my biggest fear was I was just so small. Now, of course, by the time I was out of boot camp, I was 180 pounds, so it was not an issue. They bulked me right up. But I can imagine if I'm a woman thinking about maybe becoming a driver, let's say I love trucks, I just love them, that would probably hold me back. Like, yeah, what about the physical side of it? And is everything designed for somebody who's larger than me?
It has been in the past, but I can tell you that the truck manufacturers are very receptive and have brought our drivers in. They've had me come in and talk to their marketing people and their engineers about because I'll go out to our female drivers and I'll say, okay, for those of you who own a Peterbilt such and such, what improvements could be made on that? You would not believe the stuff that they'll come back with. And then I get to go meet with the engineers and the marketing people, and they'll say, oh, well, we hadn't thought about that. And one was so simple. One was a woman who said, well, I drive at night and the cup holders aren't lit. So she goes, I once put my shake inside my coffee. and they're like, oh, well, we can light the cup holders. And here's another one. Two things actually, and Peterbilt has done this. They put in what they call a pass-through seat. So on the passenger side, it's open, and so you can slide a porta potty underneath there.
Smart.
So you can pull it out and it's hidden, or you can bring it in and use it on the inside. And the other thing is, we're going to go back to the safety aspect of this. So I want the manufacturers to install a alarm system like I have in my home. So if I'm not home and someone tries to break in, the cops will be here in 2 minutes, right?
Right.
So nobody thinks about trucks as homes, and that's one of my issues. And so I said, well, put an alarm system. And Volvo did and Peterbilt did, but the driver has to be awake to push the alarm. I'm like, no, I want an alarm system so that if somebody tries to break in, the lights will flash, the horns will go off, it'll scare someone away if the driver's sleeping. And one other thing, so many drivers have pets in their trucks. So I challenged them and I said, why don't you make a pet-friendly truck? Why don't you have a cage in there somewhere and make so that the upholstery isn't going to collect pet hair, put in a better ventilation system, and they're like, oh, we never thought about that.
Little AstroTurf in the back with some drainage. So
exactly.
So I got to imagine if I'm like a vice president of manufacturing at Peterbilt, and I'm not picking on Peterbilt, I don't know anybody there. I would hate every time you showed up. I'm like, this is going to cost us money. And I'm kidding. They probably love it because it's great. It sounds to me like you're the conduit. You're the funnel that has the loud mouth. That's and has the backing of 5,000 plus members that's growing to be able to give them real on the ground information.
I'm glad you said that because so we work with the truck stops, and one time TA Petro came and said, what can we do different with our showers? So I go on our Facebook page, there's about 11,000 male and female, mostly female drivers on there, and I'll go, what could TA Petro do better with their showers? And no complaints. I don't want to hear complaining because that doesn't help anyone. What would you like to see different? And the big issues were the vents weren't clean enough, the exchange of air wasn't enough. So like if you're in August and you're taking a shower, you walk out and you're sweaty already. And so TA Petro took the feedback and implemented every manager of every truck stop has to go and shower at least once a month in their facility. They have to clean the vents and write down when they were cleaned. And they have a little meter that shows the flow of air, and they have to record that meter. And all because our drivers said, well, these are the things that we'd like to see different. And guess what else TA Petro did? They put in big shower heads and fluffy towels and hair dryers.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's real power. See, if you want real change, ladies and gentlemen, you need somebody like Ellen in there disrupting. And by the way, let's talk about the disruption. I didn't even talk about your website. It's womenintrucking.org?
Correct. Womenintrucking.org.
Right? All right. And you need as many, if truckers specifically, and I have a lot of truckers that listen, if you want somebody like Ellen to help you, to really help your industry, join your organization. She's not there for herself. She's there for you. She's having a lot of fun doing it. Nobody says you can't, but just from the little bit I've heard, what a change. What a change. And I know nothing. Like I said, I only read one article and I went, whoa, it woke me up. Right? It's just not something you think about. So if you have somebody coming in to quote unquote replace you, that's never going to happen, by the way. I think it's somebody who's going to fill your shoes for a little while. What about the radio show?
I was thinking that maybe when I retire, I'll just get a radio show every day.
I'll be your guest.
be one of the hosts, and then maybe get paid for it. I don't know. It's kind of funny that after a lot of years, I end up doing radio, but my favorite part of the week is the Saturday morning radio show.
I get it. Yes, I'll be your sidekick. I'll be like your Robin to Howard.
You got it.
I'll read the news.
There you go. The weather.
The weather's awesome. All right, so we got womenintrucking.org. How else can our listeners reach you? Well, obviously, SiriusXM, they can listen to
SiriusXM.
Okay.
Or they can call us at 888-464-9482, I think it is. I never call my own numbers.
I know that feeling.
Yep, 888-464-9482. But it's womenintrucking.org. And I do have to mention that I also have a scholarship foundation. and that's womenintruckingfoundation.org. And that's a charitable organization. So if somebody wants to support that, it's tax deductible. And we give out a lot of scholarships. We've given out over $100,000 in scholarships to technicians, people looking at careers in safety, drivers, and then the fourth one we loosely term as leadership. So if somebody wants to work their way up in supply chain, apply for scholarship at womenintruckingfoundation.org.
That's amazing. I can't believe we didn't even talk about that.
I do need to mention it once in a while,
Yeah. And tell me about your conference. Tell my listeners about your conference. When is it?
Oh my gosh, it's November 13th or 14th and 15th. It's a Thursday, Friday. And again, it's going to be so much fun because, well, first of all, our keynote is Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao. So
Nice.
she's our header. And we'll have like breakout sessions. We're going to do brown bag lunches because normally at our conference, the 2 days of lunches, we have tables all over with about 10 at a table, and there's a name at each table about what topic people will talk about. So they'll go grab their lunch, and then we'll have a moderator at each table. Well, we're going to still do that. We're also going to have a panel of our influential women in trucking finalists, and that's always amazing. It's going to be as interactive, and we're going to gamify. So there's going to be ways for people to have fun during our conference, during the event.
Okay, so how do they go and sign up for your conference?
Womenintrucking.org, go to Accelerate, and it's called Accelerate Conference. And the lineup of speakers is amazing. Don't ask me for any names because I'm not totally sure of all the final ones yet, but our speakers are typically, we have authors of books, we have people who are very influential in the industry, and so we've had speakers talk about communications styles, or maybe branding yourself, or one of my favorites, which I don't think we can do virtually this year, but Debbie Gardner talks about self-esteem and self-defense and how to protect yourself. Especially the drivers love it, but we all love it because it's really about safety.
Well, absolutely. It's funny. I wasn't even thinking about that. We talked about, the employers, but I've heard that, there's so many independent owner operators out there.
Yes.
And you represent them as well.
That's correct. And not weird, about 15% of our members are men.
That's not weird at all. I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome. And by the way, if I was young and single, I would definitely join an organization with 5,000 women in it. I'm just kidding. There comes here comes the 1960s guy, comes right out at me. Well, Ellen, thank you so much for coming on today. What an absolute treat. I feel like we could talk for another hour because there's so many things I didn't even touch on. But your time is super valuable as well. And I really appreciate you sharing the wealth of information you share with our listeners today. Once again, everybody, it's Ellen Voie with Women in Trucking. Go to womenintrucking.org. Support that organization. It's a big, big deal. I hope to have you on again. I hope to run into you somewhere. I just had so much fun today, Ellen. Thank you so much, and we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. All right, we'll talk again soon.
Okay.